We got a call for a mentally ill female at a house. Fairly common in our area. The girl's brother called it in. We get there and see the brother outside. He says that his sister has been acting weird for the last week or so, and that we just can't go through the front door. So we go in through the garage entrance to find all the lights in the house off and none of the light switches work. We take out the flashlights and start searching. We find the girl bent down facing the corner of the living room, naked as the day she was born. We call her name and hear her muttering some sort of incantation to herself. She stops and slowly turns her head toward us, then stands and faces us. More muttering, then a loud scream as she runs straight at us. Stops halfway between us, then slowly turns, and walks back to her corner. I swear I expected her head to spin and see her crab walk backwards up the wall. I do remember an odd job from last year. I was driving back to the station to end my shift, and the operator shouted up and asked for a unit to attend a SUS Circs job, basically suspicious circumstances reported via an emergency call. The operator said that the emergency caller had stated that the man won't leave his house and his head is missing. Naturally, I had to see what that was all about and I postponed the end of my shift to assist with the call. Upon arrival, I invited myself into the property, and I walked into the living room, which was in complete darkness, to find an elderly male sat in an armchair, only visible with my torch. You could see how terrified he was. He couldn't even move to look at me or speak to acknowledge me. He was transfixed on the armchair that was opposite his. I walked, more stumbled ungraciously, over to him and tried to make contact. His eyes slowly moved from the chair to make contact with me, and then he spoke. He told me basically what we already knew, that he could see a person sitting in the armchair opposite and that the person had no head. He said, "Please just take him away." Being the quick-thinking neighborhood police officer that I am, I asked the ghost to please leave the premises and stated that I would arrest him if he failed to comply. Needless to say, I didn't have any trouble from the suspect. I assumed that the man had some kind of mental health issue and called an ambulance, only to find out that this was his first episode and that he was otherwise in perfect health. Basically, I'm one of the few cops that have apprehended a ghost. I'm a real-life ghostbuster. Not me, but my friend is a cop in a major Canadian metropolitan, and one night that we were supposed to go out after his shift, he decided to pick me up in his cop car, since he was almost finished his shift and was just going to drop the car back at the depot. On the way, though, he got a call that someone was complaining about noises coming from their basement that sounded like a person, so he decided to make that his last stop. I was told to wait in the car, while he talked with the homeowner and checked it out. He was gone for about half an hour before he came back and had this terrified/amazed face on him. Apparently, the homeowner was hearing loud thuds from his basement for a couple of weeks, but on the day of the call, they were really loud and scaring him. He had a walk-in basement, so he thought maybe someone had broken in. My friend goes to the basement to check it out with the homeowner. Basement is all dark, and the lights need to be turned on from the electrical panel. So they get to the panel, and my friend says he saw something in the corner of his eye. He turns around, and at an end of a hallway, which leads to a cold storage, he sees a guy facing the door of the cold storage just standing there. He yells at the guy to turn around, but he doesn't. Homeowner sees him, too, and is really scared. Friend asks the guy to turn around once more before hitting the switch for the lights, and the guy/ghost at the cold storage just disappears when the lights come on. My friend swore that he searched every inch of that basement and could not find anyone else there. Homeowner is shook up and says he's gonna stay with a friend for a night, and my friend calls another cop to survey the house to see if anyone tries to enter the main house or basement. Not sure what happened after, but my friend swears he saw someone in that basement. Received a call from an elderly lady who had trouble breathing. I had taken several calls from her and her husband in the past, so I recognized her voice. I dispatched an ambulance to her residence and held her on the line trying to keep her calm while the ambulance was responding. Ambulance advised that they have a 15-minute estimated time of arrival. She lived in a very rural part of West Virginia. I'm talking to her, asking about her husband and how he was doing and just making small talk with her. The ambulance calls in and advises they are on scene, and I let them know that she is in severe respiratory distress and I still had her on the line. I let her know the ambulance is coming to the door. And she says, "Okay," and hangs up the phone. Pretty normal, yeah. Well, here's where it gets weird. The EMT and paramedic on scene call back about a minute later and advise no one is answering the door. We have a sheriff unit who was in the area pulling on scene about that time. The sheriff unit confirmed the address and advised he is breaching the door to make access to the point. 5 minutes go by and the paramedic on scene radios in asking who the caller was. I advise it was the elderly female who lived at the residence. He tells me that he's going to call in and needs to speak with the supervisor on shift. We get him over to the supervisor, and the supervisor confirms the information that I gave him and asks what's going on. Apparently, the elderly female had been deceased for a while and was in full rigor mortis. They thought I was wrong on the caller, but the other dispatchers played it back and confirmed that it was the female who called. The ambulance transferred the hospital, and we got the same calls in disbelief from the doctors. So, I took a call from a ghost. Got a call from a guy saying he was sitting in his car with a shotgun and was going to kill himself. He seemed very calm and I could tell in his voice that he had made up his mind and this wasn't a cry for help like most of the other suicide calls I receive. He told me he was at one of our train stations but wouldn't tell me which one, so while I had officers out looking for him I made small talk with him about his family and sports. I even had him laugh a few times. After about 10 minutes of talking and me thinking I've made progress, he finally says, "Well, it's been nice talking to you, but I gotta get going." He then proceeded to put the gun in his mouth and pull the trigger. I heard his death gurgles.